Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jason Knight, and on each episode of this podcast, I'll be having inspiring conversations with passionate product people. If you're friends with passionate product people, then why don't you do them a favour and pass them the link to this episode either before or after you listen to it, so they can cue it up too and be inspired themselves. As my mum used to say, sharing really is caring. On tonight's episode, we talk about the dark depths of hustle culture and follow my guest on a journey from the capital of Ukraine through Berlin, out to Silicon Valley, and now into upstate New York. We'll talk about some of the lessons she learned founding a startup and working so hard that she completely burned out, why that's turned her against the concept of hustle culture, how she's trying to build her new business sustainably, and how she's trying to stop others making the same mistake. We'll also talk about her new community where she's aiming to put an end to the concept of resumes and CVs and just letting people build stuff together instead. For all this and much more, please join us on One Night in Product. So my guest tonight is Polina Marchenko. Polina is a self-described geekette at heart, passionate about education, community building and building habit-forming products. A blogger, mentor, networker and serial startup founder who moved to Silicon Valley via Berlin and more recently to upstate New York, where she's currently combining 3 simultaneous startups with being a mum and a qualified Zumba trainer. Absolutely hates indecisiveness and laziness. I have to say, me too, but I can't quite be bothered to make up my mind about which I hate more. Hi Polina, how are you tonight?
Hi Jason, thank you so much for such a warm introduction. I'm pretty well, really excited to be here, finally.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
Just for our listeners' benefit, this has been an interview that's been long in the making. So good to get it over the line. So first things first, you've recently moved from Silicon Valley to upstate New York. Now that feels like it could be a bit of a change of pace. Is that fair to say? Has it been a bit of a change?
Well, honestly speaking, we have moved from Silicon Valley already last year, just before the pandemic hit. And we're just slowing down, and even more slowing down. Definitely change of pace because, now we suddenly find ourselves in a very small town in upstate New York, have around, 2,000 citizens here. So it's a huge, huge change for me because originally I come from a capital of Ukraine. It is about 3 million people. I lived in Berlin for 10 years, 3.5 million people. Because Silicon Valley was much smaller than that, but still with all the infrastructure, all the drive. So I think pandemic make us slow down quite a bit.
Now that doesn't sound like a town that's got like its own product community already or like a product tank or anything like that. So given your interest in community building, is that like one of the first things on your list is to start the product community in your local town?
This is an interesting question. Actually, I didn't think about this anymore, location binded, because over the past year, I was working and creating communities all globally, so that's why, given the privilege that both myself and my husband can work remotely, it's been great. So now we're in a small town. Still, I'm connected to all the people that I want to be connected to, all the product leaders, entrepreneurs, aspiring product managers, and so on and so forth. And my location is not a limit anymore.
And what about the Zumba as well? Like, is it time to start up another startup in your local town and bring dancercise to the masses when the lockdown restrictions are eased?
Oh, I wish, I wish I also do more Zumba for myself, because once again, all this local restrictions and inability to come together in groups or come together in groups only with limitations has been very challenging, especially in this type of activity. So this is probably something on my list, but I'm also very pregnant at the moment. So cannot do this fun stuff at the moment anymore. But hopefully in the next half a year, we'll see that it will also change to the positive.
Fingers crossed. So before we go deep into your startups, let's go back in time and meet you as a younger woman. You've just moved from Ukraine to Berlin. You've gotten your MSc in entrepreneurship and marketing. Although actually that's interesting in its own because you've obviously studied this stuff from a fairly early age. You've obviously taken this through education and have a real passion for entrepreneurship, startups and the like. Where do you think that came from?
I always ask myself this question, and I'm not 100% sure. I think it was just my genuine curiosity about how the things work. And it just led me naturally to where I came. I would say that I started my career in a startup accelerator program in Berlin. And how I came there, I was still a student, but I was very curious about how companies are built, how entrepreneurs work together and all this stuff. So I selected for myself, self-selected into entrepreneurship program, which honestly speaking, I was like very disappointed because our professor was only preaching theory of entrepreneurship, has never done anything practical, but I couldn't know. So I was looking for myself different avenues of how actually to learn practical skills and how to learn from real entrepreneurs. And it just like grew as a snowball. I just couldn't have enough. So I started with that program. I was very curious, first working with entrepreneurs and observing them more or less. Then started working as a product manager in a startup, still observing entrepreneurs as product leaders and founders and so on and so forth. And just in a year, I made the leap into becoming an entrepreneur myself. So just natural curiosity, still have it.
Always learning. But it's interesting though, because you just touched on it yourself. You had this product management position, I think, at a company called Mirapodo, which I think is a shoe shop or shoe store or something like that. So coming to that with your interest in entrepreneurship and your eager keenness to learn, did it feel weird then working as a junior product manager for a startup or for a small company, or do you feel that was a really necessary step for you to start to build some of those hard skills up?
I would say both. It definitely felt weird because, I got my position, I would say, I think it was around 2010, maybe 2011. And back then, product management was not so clearly defined. So when I got an offer, I just, read the description that I'll be working with innovative products. And this is what hooked me. So otherwise, I didn't know anything. I have never worked with designers or developers before. So it was all new experience. That's why it was definitely weird. In terms of if it was weird for the fact that I was working for someone, I was not an entrepreneur myself. I think back then I even didn't realize that I was ready to do this step. And the fun fact was that my husband actually was always telling me, hey, he wants to start a company as soon as possible. He wants to work for himself, but he was also still a student. And I was telling him all the time, it's too early. You should get experience. You're not experienced yet. So do it first. And then I did completely the opposite.
But do you feel that gave you a real edge then, though, when you did start to move into your own stuff, like the fact that you've built things for other people and you've built some of those hard skills and started to understand how hard it can be or some of the things that you have to concentrate on?
Probably yes. Yeah, I would be probably not 100% honest if I say no, it didn't give me anything. But still, starting a new company from scratch with people you basically do not know and jump into the idea that it's literally just an idea. There was no proof of concept or anything. Felt like very, very different. But at the same time, of course, like working as a PM, I, firsthand learned what does it mean actually to work with a developer and how challenging it is. So I think this learning helped me a little bit, to work with my future co-founder, who's a technical co-founder, and try to find common ground with him also.
Yeah, so it wasn't too long after that you branched out and actually did start up your own thing, which I think was called Captain Cook. I think that was a e-commerce type affair. Is that fair to say? How was that experience for you starting that up yourself?
I would say it was experience of my life. Still, I still feel how it defines my life even today. The way I think, the way I approach the things. There are many things that I learned that I actually wanted to unlearn. And there were many things who actually brought me where I am today. Starting it was very cool. Very, I completely had, pink glasses. It was a very fun experience. I was very naive. I thought we'll conquer the world within 6 months. It turned different. I mean, I was working in that startup for 3.5 years until I got, I would say, severe burnout, which back then I even didn't know exists. Something like the term of it I have never heard before. And I think I realized I had it probably a year after it. So it was a great experience all in all. I learned a bunch of things. I challenged myself in so many ways, and I loved it all. And by the way, the startup got acquired recently, which is a huge milestone. So I finally had my exit, and it feels great because now it's official, So now I'm officially a co-founder who exited the company. So sounds great, no? But it was a great experience. The only thing after I decided that it's time for me to move on, I thought I would never start another company again. I was so burned out, and I was so afraid, and I was doubting myself so much, But once again, the realization that all learnings were necessary and helpful for my future came just a couple of years after.
Yeah, and we'll come to your other startups in a minute, but do you feel that being in that position and burning out as you did and having that fairly negative experience at the time and obviously reflecting back on that, do you think that taught you then coping skills so that your next round of entrepreneurship was something that you approached in a different way? Or was it just that you were more experienced generally the second time round and that you could kind of cope with things a little better?
Yeah, this is a great question. And honestly, I needed a lot of reflection. I needed so much reflection that I didn't know that I would need so much. So it basically took me years to realize what happened, why it happened, what I didn't do right, what went well, why, and all these questions. And now I have a completely different approach to startups and to entrepreneurship and how do I see myself also as a founder. Completely changed. So I would say like 180 degrees. It's completely different. Once again, maybe in 2 or 3 years, I would be saying exactly the same, and saying like, hey, it's changed again, but I'm looking forward to it. I think it's, if you cannot say, wow, I was so dumb back then, it's basically you didn't learn anything. You should be always learning. And I feel now I'm in this resourceful state when I realized how much I learned and now how I want to approach the things differently.
But after that, it was off to San Francisco, to the home of technology and all the big tech companies. So I don't need to ask why someone would want to go out there if they had this entrepreneurial spirit and they had this desire to work with startups and big tech companies. But it's still a big move. And I understand that you, when you first landed, ended up in a hacker house with like 14 different people living with you. Now that sounds intense, but I guess in Silicon Valley also was a real hot pot of ideas and innovation. And some of those ideas I'm sure were good. Some of those ideas were maybe not so good. But how was that as an experience? Did you find that quite intense in and as of itself?
Yeah, first of all, I have to say that the move from Berlin to San Francisco at that time was a little bit forced. We didn't plan so much to make this drastic move that year, but the stars aligned this way. So basically, just to give you a little bit of a preview, my husband won a green card, but it was already 10 years ago, and we were not making that move for 5 years. And the situation, what happened back then was that I didn't visit him. He was living already in the US, in Utah. He was doing his coding bootcamp, so he was also leveling up and so on. And I didn't visit him for 8 months because of the startup in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, when I did visit him, I was planning to visit him for 2 weeks. The border officer told me that I have a problem because I am a green card holder and I'm supposed to be in the country at least every 6 months. I didn't do it. So if I am planning to go back to Berlin in 2 weeks, next time when I try to come back to the US, I'll probably go to the court.
Uh-huh.
So, and you can imagine. So basically, this was a combination of things. I was already burned out from my startup. Then this thing happened, which I had really to make a tough decision. Okay, can I do it to our family that I'm putting it at risk that I cannot come back to the US where my husband is and stay in Europe, or I actually make the move? And after talking to lawyers, we decided that we have to make a move. And basically, I came with one luggage case and I stayed for several months in the hacker house with my husband. So it was quite an adventure, but I think we learned a lot. And just seeing other people who are hustling and trying to get the foot into the door, talking to investors, trying to pitch their ideas. I mean, in the moment when I was very burned out and I actually didn't know what to do, it was extra challenge. But it was a great experience. I'm glad we had it. And honestly, I don't want to have it again. That was a one-time opportunity and it's fine like this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a way it kind of feels like, based on what you just said, that it was almost like rubbing your face in it a little bit. You know, you've moved over there, as you say, you've just come out of the experience that you had, and then you see all these other people just doing exactly the same thing or trying to do exactly the same thing. And obviously the term hustle these days has, in some quarters, a kind of negative connotation as well. Like it's almost seen as a toxic culture of people just trying to just do everything. And do you feel that certainly now, for example, you've started up new things, and whenever people start up new things, there's always this kind of, oh yeah, you got to hustle. Like, do you feel that you're hustling now, or do you feel that you've developed a different approach?
Yeah, this is actually a topic very dear to my heart because I am now anti-hustle movement, you know. So I don't believe in working 80, 90 hours per week and being productive. And actually, what's more important, being happy and satisfied with your life. So once again, I've been there. I know how it feels. It might work well for a couple of months, but it's definitely not sustainable. And once again, many things have changed in my life. I became a mother and I'm expecting a second child. So once again, when I decided that I want to do it again, I wanted to do it completely different, you know, to have still peace of my mind, to have a time to spend with my daughter, to have time for myself, you know, to have time to reflect and so on and so forth. And so far, maybe I'm not going as fast as I was going back then. But once again, reflecting, I'm thinking like, did we even need it, you know, like to go that fast and to burn that much? Or it is actually more of a sustainable approach to building a sustainable business?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point around like how fast is too fast in a way, right? But I guess it is still such a cliche, certainly when you look at some of the Silicon Valley companies and all these companies that are just like going massive overnight, and all these people going online saying about their routines and how they've, yeah, like you say, working 18 hours a day and to get up at 5 o'clock every morning and run a half marathon, and then, you know, come home, eat 500 eggs, and then read 15 books, and then doing like hours and hours of investment and developing stuff. And it's just, yeah. I mean, maybe it's because I'm getting on a bit, but it feels like that would be a bit of a struggle.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that I still have friends like this. I still have friends who are hustling all the time. And I'm trying like basically to, you know, to slow them down, to also through sharing my experience, through sharing my routines, through sharing, you know, how I feel doing this. Because very often I hear from them, it's like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I don't want it anymore, but I have to, and all this stuff. But once again, I think this is one thing that you cannot probably teach someone else how to do. It's basically you have to either experience it through, you know, the way I experienced it, or you have to be so conscious and so self-aware that you will feel the tipping point, after which you will say, okay, now it's enough. Now I will approach things differently. Now, once again, so there are definitely many success stories that come out of hustling. At the same time, I do believe that there is another opportunity to be successful.
Well, there's a certain level of survivorship bias as well, right? So you're only really hearing about the successful people that actually did it, and not necessarily worrying about all of the other people that fell by the wayside. Do you think it's something that it's actually possible to break through with people and actually explain it to them and show them the stories and kind of get them to change their mind? Or do you think they basically have to kind of snap on their own before they actually really feel it?
Yeah, maybe I'm not persuasive enough, but once again, from my experience, it is you cannot. I mean, I was not able to teach any of my friends that they have an opportunity to approach it differently. They still keep hustling. You know, they're complaining big time, but they keep hustling. They're complaining again, and they still do the same mistakes, do the same stuff. Once again, so some of them actually succeeded very, very well in the past years. They're much more successful than I am. But once again, in terms of the business, and I think in my life, what was very important, there was one book that I was reading actually during my move from Berlin to to San Francisco when I was thinking about all the opportunities and so on. It was the book. It's called Black Hole Focus. And it's basically helped me realize, okay, what do I actually want beyond my business? So business I cannot define myself just by my business. And this is what I was doing for years. So what do I actually want? Like, how do I want to approach my life? How do I want to design my life? How do I want to feel? And this is basically what I'm trying also to propagate now and share with others, that business is not everything. So, but once again, I think to some extent you have to learn from your mistakes. In this case, it's very, very difficult to learn from mistakes of others.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just listening to other people's stories isn't quite as visceral. You don't feel it in your bones as much as you could. It just sounds like something that, that's never going to happen to me.
Exactly.
Just like everything else that always happens to people in the end. But you mentioned a couple of times about like how you've got some people that you know that have been very successful. So, for example, if we think back to your hacker house, were there any like big name stars that have gone on to unicorn status there, or have they all kind of burned out already, as far as you know?
Not from that cohort. I would not say that they just burned out. I think many of those people were international entrepreneurs who had a very naive idea that they will come to Silicon Valley for 3 or 4 months and they will raise money. And, in 99.9% of cases, it just doesn't work like this. And once again, so when I was working with Captain Cook, I was also that naive, and I also went through this, also a couple of years before. It wasn't my first time visiting Silicon Valley. Yeah, it just doesn't work like this. So although back then we were able to raise, we were accepted into the Silicon Valley Accelerator program. But once again, it was not the sum of money that actually was decisive for our success in the long term.
So let's talk about your later startups. Now, I'm aware that this situation may have changed now, which will be an interesting thing to talk about. But I understand that we had She Aspired, which was aiming to fast-track women into product management. We had Futurista, which was aiming to inspire teenage girls into STEM careers. And Side Project, which is aiming to connect professionals who want to build projects together. So these are all obviously playing in a fairly similar space, or they have been playing in a similar space. They're all different angles on the same problem, which is trying to help people get into product or into tech or being entrepreneurs and building things. Why do you think you've been so passionate about paying it forward into that area? Is that something that is a real passion for you?
Yeah, I could definitely say so. I mean, generally I would say I'm just passionate about community. I'm passionate about community building. I'm passionate about connecting people and providing them more opportunities through these networks. It could be like micro networks. It doesn't have to be like always global. It could be just literally connecting two people who live across the street, but they just do not know about each other. And I think I'm just that passionate about having the community around me because I realized the power of it. I realized how helpful it could be because I was moving so much in my life, So I moved to Berlin, then I moved within Berlin, then I moved to Silicon Valley, then I moved to Oregon. Now I moved to New York. So I basically, I guess from one perspective, I created this muscle of a kind of being more adaptive. From another perspective, I was very often very lonely. And being lonely is not a great starting point for somebody to become successful or, in the matter of success, how I define it is basically not just successful in business, but literally happy with your life. So this was the main trigger. I realized that without the community, I really feel lost. I have nobody to share my learnings, my struggles with. I have nobody to also help guide me. And with the community, I'm myself on steroids, basically. So that's why I decided that I want to provide these opportunities also for other people. And this is how all of this started.
Yeah, that's great. And obviously it's a really inspirational story as well. It's really good to be able to bring people along and maybe help them in ways that you weren't getting helped when you were making that journey. So before we speak about where these are today, what were some of the successes that you had with those 3 projects from the point where you started them to the present day?
Yeah, definitely. So once again, I started them all during the COVID year, last year. And it was after I decided that I basically we want to move to Oregon, and that's why I'll be quitting my product management job in San Francisco. And I took 3 months off, so I didn't jump into any of this adventures immediately. I literally tried to think and to dig deeper in myself. What do I actually want to do? And once again, I came up with the vision that I actually want to help people. And there are different ways to help connect people. And that's why there were 3 different ideas. They also didn't start all simultaneously. It was kind of like one coming after another because I was meeting new people, getting more inspiration. And last year, it was also my intention to honestly to defocus. So I wanted to explore. I wanted to find out what works, what doesn't work. And in the first place, a little bit egoistically, I was trying to find out what works for me. Not only like to others, but it's important also to find out what actually works and inspires me, what I can be working on for a long time. And these 3 ideas came out. I think one of the most amazing things, which, when I look back now on Futurista, for example, so I will correct you a little bit, we're not just helping teen girls to get into STEM. With the platform, we're trying to show them different opportunities, because very often teenagers, but also adults alike, we're stuck in our own social circles. And this is basically how our career steps are defined. So we decided that it actually makes sense. And we tested it all also with different teen girls, asked them if it really makes sense to open up this perspective. So if your father is a teacher, your mother is a doctor, is it the only options that you have, or we are able to show you other opportunities and so on and so forth. So I think the learning with that was, first of all, it was amazing because I was able to work with all of my friends, and it was the first time in my life. And I consider it a huge achievement. So I basically gathered the team from around the globe, from Berlin, San Francisco, New York, but consisted all of the women I used to work before in my life, starting from this long, long time ago in Accelerator in Berlin. So it was an amazing experience because I firsthand realized how different it might be to work with people you actually know and how empowering it is and how far you can come. And I think the main learning from that was there are some ideas you can pursue as a side project, and this is how I saw it. And this is how we basically started it. And there are some ideas which are just in their scope, they're way beyond side project. So that's why after a year, we realized that we have learned a lot. We have launched the podcast for teen girls. We have created ambassador program for them. But we realized that if we want to actually bring it to some next level, we need to spend much more time than we were spending. And we were literally spending just a couple of hours per week. And at some point, it was once again draining for everyone because everyone felt a sense that we're not investing enough, but nobody could invest more. So that's why, once again, because I started a couple of things before, also in form of side projects, for me, it was pretty clear that, there are some things where you have the sense of, hey, you have to persevere. And there are some things where you have to have a clear cut. And in this case, it was the second option. And I'm not regretting. I think it was the right idea. And maybe at some point, we'll get back to it in a different form.
So again, do you feel that you identified some early warning signals from your previous experience that made you think sooner than maybe you would have done if you hadn't had those warning signals, that maybe you would only be able to do the Futurista stuff if you put significantly more time into it, and that was what then, those early warning signals kind of tripped a flag and you decided at that point?
Yeah, I would say so. I think basically what I mentioned in terms of, okay, you're feeling this urge to invest more and more time, and then you're getting again and again very uncomfortable with yourself. You're getting unhappy with yourself. You're starting to judge yourself. So this whole feelings, like the spectrum of feelings, is definitely very, very draining. And this is something that after my first experience, I decided I just don't want to have as a part of my life.
Yeah.
I cannot say that, hey, now the purpose of my life is to be comfortable all the time. This is also not the case. I mean, I'm always going out of my comfort zone regularly. But at the same time, that type of uncomfort, that where you're literally like bitching yourself for not having enough time and you don't know where to get this time. And that's why you're blaming all your, like unsuccesses on this lack of time. I think it was one of the major learnings.
So controlled discomfort is the story there. You want to make sure you're in control of your discomfort. So is that the same story then behind She Aspired as well? Like exactly the same, and everything now is focusing on side project as the main project?
Yeah, well, the story behind She Aspired was a little bit different. So basically, it was a program for aspiring product managers, women product managers that we wanted to help. We had a couple of cohorts. Then my partner wanted to take time for herself. She had a little bit of a burnout, if you can say it. And we just lost the momentum, basically, with that endeavor. And we lost the momentum. And after she was back and we tried to find the momentum again, we started to dig deeper into why we're doing the program, what went well, and realized that probably it was not like super solid idea yet. And we have to restructure many things to make it once again as great as we think, because MVP, worked well, but what's next? So and once again, I think in this case, we just didn't find our momentum again. And once again, it's good like this. I mean, I'm happy that we were honest with each other and just decided that it's not the right time. It's not the right state of mind to continue doing it.
So now you're down to one project, which is called Side Project. How's that going at the moment? Is that gaining momentum? Are you having some early successes with that?
Absolutely. I mean, Side Project is so dear to my heart, so I cannot even explain, so it's just something where not only other people are empowered to learn every day and once again fail forward, because we're basically helping people unleash their potential, because they are all willing to transition into tech. It doesn't matter which role, engineering, design, or product management. Most of them, like the only experience they have is from books or from online courses. So they have never done something practical before. That's why this is actually a huge cause for imposter syndrome, even if you get a role.
Yeah.
And we just want to help them, once again, get rid of the imposter syndrome and in firsthand just get the practical experience. And that's why I love startups. I love seeing people do and build new things. And this is what I experience basically every couple of weeks with Side Project. I just, I'm a third party now. I'm not involved in their project so much, but basically this is just a blessing for me, for my personality, for what I want in my life, just to see how other people evolve and build stuff. So that's the best constellation that I could have ever imagined. And we had our successes, of course. So once again, Side Project is, from our perspective, it is a community or marketplace, I would say, for people who want to build side projects. They can find ideas, they can find other people, join teams, and so on and so forth. And from another perspective, it is also kind of a mentorship program where within 12 weeks, people build projects from scratch. And once again, I learned so much from how they build it and what are actually the obstacles of becoming a better team or succeeding building something and so on and so forth. And it is absolutely a new perspective for me, because till now I was building something, but I was always a part of it. And now I just see it completely different because I can observe other people. And it just my learning personally has accelerated. But not only this, I mean, many people provide us great feedback. Many people say that it drastically helped them accelerate their careers. So they got the jobs because they were actually able to talk in the interviews about their real experiences, not about theory that they potentially would execute or solve problems that way. They were actually talking about the stuff that they experienced. So that's why that made for them a huge difference. And this is why I really want to continue doing it.
And what are your plans for Side Project over the next year? I mean, is it all about scale or is it about quality content? I mean, it's a marketplace, like you say, so I guess some of the content is somewhat outside of your control. But what are your broad plans for Side Project over the next 12 months?
Yeah, I would say we're very early. So basically, I started last year. So it is almost 1 year old. But you can imagine I'm doing it part-time. So the speed is not fantastic. But once again, I'm grateful for how we're going. I learned a lot from the program. So we're now finalizing in the final week of the third cohort. So I have learned a lot from that. And I think now is the time also for me to take a break from the program and basically revise and reflect once again on how we can improve it, how we can make the program so solid that it actually helps to make a change, not only for one group of people, PMs, right, but also for designers and engineers. And this is the major challenge, because this is what I'm telling always people who are starting out is you have to focus on one customer group, but in our case, it's complete opposite, So the side project kind of lives and stands with this diversity of different talents. So that's why this is definitely something that I learn that hopefully I will know better in the next months. But I want to intentionally take time to reflect on the program, and in the meantime to implement the learnings from the program, because it was an intense 12-week program. So I want to implement the learnings from the program in the community. So for people who are building projects in their own pace and so on. So that's why everything is exciting. And I was super blessed to find within the side project community also enthusiasts who decided to build side project platform, basically going away from Slack, which is deleting our messages because we're way beyond the free limit, and it's very, very draining and not great. It was great as an MVP, but once again, I think we're ready now to make the next step, and hopefully in the next month we're going to launch a side project platform where people can find the projects, can find the talents for their projects, and it will be on a different level. But lots of things to do. And once again, always take time to reflect to improve it, basically.
So where can people catch up with you after this call if they want to chat more about product management or entrepreneurship, or maybe find out a bit more about Side Project?
Yeah, I'm usually fairly active on LinkedIn. So everyone is welcome to contact me directly over there. And otherwise, everyone is welcome to join our still Slack community, which is less ideal, but still this is the place where we meet. So just go to sideproject.com, and this is where you'll find everything what we're doing currently.
Excellent. Well, hopefully a few people will come your way. So that's been a really interesting chat. So obviously really glad that you spent your time and that we finally made it and you could spend some time sharing your story. Obviously wish you all the best for your upcoming Life Change Part 2. But as for now, again, thanks very much for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Jason.
As ever, thanks for listening. I hope you found the episode inspiring and interesting. If you did, again, I'd love it if you could share it with your friends so they can find it inspiring and interesting too. And you can also pop over to onenightinproduct.com and sign up to the mailing list or join us on LinkedIn if you want to make sure you never miss another episode again. I'll be back soon with another inspiring guest, but as for now, thanks and good night.